Hello, Michael.
Hey, Peter. How are you?
First, let me welcome all of our participants from NYFA, from New York Film Academy. Um, we're here for to meet with and have a Q&A with the great Michael Pressman. And I'm Peter Bailoff, for those of you who don't know me. I teach screenwriting and a couple of acting classes at New York Film Academy in South Beach. I want to just tell you a little bit about Michael. I'm going to do the 1 minute bio, Michael,
Okay, do the one.
which you deserve a lot more, but I'll do the best I can.
I'm fine.
Michael started out in the theater. He was studied acting and directing at Carnegie Mellon University, then moved to LA to study film at Cal Arts. Michael is that rare breed of filmmaker who's done it all. He's directed feature films, including Dr. Detroit and Some Kind of Hero, starring Richard Pryor. That's a story in itself, I have a feeling, among many other feature films. He's served as a showrunner, producer, and director on numerous TV series and has directed multiple episodes of Emmy award-winning shows such as Law and Order and Grey's Academy, Picket Fences, so many more. He's also directed episodes of Blue Bloods, The Guardian, Chicago Med, Sneaky Pete, too many to mention here. He's also directed an extensive list of TV movies, including one that I co-wrote and produced for Universal called Quicksand, No Escape. He even directed a play on Broadway, a revival of Come Back Little Sheba, starring Esapatha Merkerson. Michael has won 2 Emmys for executive producing and show running on the acclaimed series Picket Fences, and earned both an Emmy nomination and a DGA nomination for his work on the hospital series Chicago Hope. I want to say that for me, watching Michael work was a masterclass in directing. He is extremely knowledgeable in all aspects of filmmaking, from script to screen, and we have a lot to learn from Michael. So Michael, it's been a while. The last time we were together, I think we were talking about a script of mine that you didn't like, but that was optioned at Miramax, believe it or not. But prior to that, we did a great movie together. We had a lot of fun doing Quicksand.
We did. Quicksand was probably one of the better experiences in the television movie world, because there was such a kind of freedom in those days. And I'm going to pass some compliments back to you, and then we'll stop with the that stuff. But the script, the great thing about this script that Peter and his partner Dave Wallert, right? Have I got that right, Dave?
Yeah, Wallert, right.
Was in addition to being a kind of whodunit in a sense, it was this great character study in a relationship between a crooked vice cop played by Donald Sutherland and a innocent architect who played by Tim Matheson, the wonderful Tim, who was struggling with his own sense of what was moral and not. And there was such complexity in this script that, and I think I'm going to sort of jump into a little aspect about directing, is it was once told to me by a famous director, Martin Ritt, who said, "Cast well, you'll direct well." And it was simple, but that has stayed with me. And when we got Donald Sutherland in that television movie, we had cast well, because he brought a dimension to that film that was buried in that script that he found. And if you were going to go, and I'll get to this next point in a minute, but when you start to think about, well, what did he find? He found a love story between these two characters that, in fact, not that he was, quote, a homosexual, because he was in love with the Tim Matheson character, but you didn't quite know. And it didn't really matter because he kind of really fell in love with him. And at the same time, he was torturing him and framing him and trying to get $50,000 off of him for a murder that he didn't do. It was a wild script, but the relationship between the two of them was what made this thing lift. And sometimes as a director, the best thing you can do is get out of the way. And I wouldn't say I got out of the way, but I certainly mind this relationship. And
we had quite a casting there. We had Felicity Huffman.
Right.
We had the great John Finn, character actor, and a very young Kaylee Cuoco.
Yes, which I checked again and went, oh my God, I didn't even know that at the time. And I will add and sort of just say a little bit about my background also, and then we can get into whatever we want to get into here. That movie, television movie, was 30 years ago. I don't know why it feels like 10 days ago, because I can remember vividly the experience, and it's so great to see Peter again, though we had run into each other a couple of times, but it was that experience that bonded us. And I grew up in New York. I grew up on the East Coast, and to a family of artists. My mother was a dancer. My father was an acting teacher and a theater director, and very political family. And my father was blacklisted during the whole McCarthy period. And that's a whole other subject to talk about another time, unless someone wants to ask any questions. But I have a very strong memory when I was 10 and 12 years old, and I'd sit in front of the TV with my younger brother, and we'd be watching Superman, and my father would walk in and go, oh, there's George Reeves, and I'd say, you know Superman? And be like, oh, I directed him in live TV. And then, or watching Bonanza, oh, there's Lauren Green. And go, you know Lauren? Yes, he was a student at the Playhouse. But we were New York kids. We were not LA kids. So this was like a screen that our father knew these people. It didn't seem real. Oh, there's Dick Boone and Have Gun Will Travel. And it'd be like, we couldn't believe it, right? And he hadn't seen them in 10 or 12 years or so. And that seemed like ages ago. And I remember thinking, if he hasn't seen Lauren Green in 10 years, what does it even mean? Because I was only 12. I haven't seen Peter in 30 years. However, and that's with the association, but the payoff of the story was finally my father had enough of us not believing him. And he said one morning, we're going to meet the Thanksgiving Day parade, which was down on 20 blocks from us. And we got all excited, and somehow he had gotten a pass, and I don't understand the details. And we walked in, and a bus pulled up, and out stepped the cast of Bonanza. And out stepped Lauren Green in full regalia. And he went, David, like this, and came over, and we met him, and they invited us to breakfast at the I want to say the Polo Lounge, no, the Plaza Hotel, and we met Haas and Little Joe, and you know, our minds were blown. So that was my introduction to Hollywood and time passage.
Michael, you started directing at such a young age. You were given huge feature film assignments. How did that happen?
Well, you know, I do look back and I have to go, how did that happen? It was a different time. I was at a moment where Steven Spielberg had broken on the scene and made the studios $100 million or $200 million. And the doors flew wide open for young filmmakers coming out of film school or coming out of the Roger Corman School, which my very first feature was for Roger Corman, a $200,000 drive-in kind of sexploitation comedy romp about two women bank robbers, which was called The Great Texas Dynamite Chase. And that film got a lot of traction. And as a result, I got an agent, and I was 26, and I went for a year not working. And then all of a sudden, one day, the phone rang at our house. There was no answering machine. I had no cell phone. I had no text. And it was, hold on for Don Simpson at Paramount Pictures. I go, oh my God. And I get Don Simpson. He goes, I just watched The Great Texas Dynamite Chase. Would you come in and meet to be considered for a director for the sequel to The Bad News Bears? So I went in. I think I was the last of 15 directors. There was no script. There was nothing. And they were looking for the next young, hot directors. Now, it was sink or swim. I got together with Paul Brickman, who wonderful writer who wrote a wonderful script. We shot this movie. It turned out to be successful, and it launched my feature film career up until the point where I was no longer making hit movies. And as I've always said, television has been my very best friend. And feature films is an art form that's very tough and mean, because you can be wonderfully talented, but if your film doesn't make money, it falls on your shoulders. And I had several films that did not do well at the box office. So that's how all that came about.
You know, it's funny, I never asked you this question. By the way, it's been 20 years since we've actually gotten together. We had breakfast together at Junior's in Westwood.
I remember. Thank you. Sorry. See, it's back. Okay.
He said he didn't like a script that I had written that was actually optioned at Miramax. So, but didn't get made. So you were right.
No.
But in any case, and I cannot believe I never asked you about working with Richard Pryor. Now, it's amazing. A lot of our students don't know who Richard Pryor was. Richard Pryor is maybe one of the greatest stand-up comedians in history, and a huge movie star. But you were very young, and you were working with a comedic legend. What was that like? I mean,
well, you know, I have been doing some writing, and I've been working on a book about directing and sort of my own personal experiences. And I wrote a story recently about my experience with Richard that's coming to my mind. It was the strangest marriage, because I had just done this film, Boulevard Nights, about East Los Angeles Chicano gangs, and it had gotten a lot of attention. And Richard Pryor had this deal at Paramount, and they put us together to meet. And we couldn't have been more opposite. I don't know how to describe it. I mean, you know, but somehow, as they say, opposites attract. And we had a 2-hour meeting in which we discussed everything from personal relationships to why we do what we do. And he finally looked at me and said, do you really want to make this movie? And by the way, he had director approval. So, and I went in figuring he'll never approve me. So let's just go have a conversation. And he said, why do you want to make this movie? And I said, because I think it's an important story to tell. And he said, I'm afraid the studio is going to make it into a silly war comedy, because he wanted to do a dramatic film. And this was a year after he had had the tragic burning up incident with drugs. And so if you don't know the details, you can just type in Richard Pryor in Wikipedia and you'll find out about it. And I said, listen, I will do everything in my power to honor our agreement and make this a dramatic film. And we did. And we did. And here's the surprise. Richard Pryor appreciated being treated like a serious actor. He liked rehearsing. He liked knowing his lines. He came in prepared. He would always find something special. This was the wonderful thing about working with him. But the thing I took away from him that I learned was to embrace surprise. Because I will tell you that there were many scenes where I had no idea what was going to happen in them. And he had this ability to take a written scene and all of a sudden find something that was unexpected, whether it was a one added line that he would throw in, that was the joke of the whole scene, or an emotional reaction. And it was so unpredictable that it became a life-changing experience for me as a young director. Up until that point, I think I was super planned.
Genius, though, wouldn't you say?
Say that again?
True genius.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have a lot of questions starting to add up here, so let's go to it if you don't mind.
Yeah, please, let's start.
Okay, so this is from Kristen Jose, who asks you, if a guy who doesn't have any experience as a director, if he is able to vision his script, how successful a director can he be? In other words, can vision alone carry you?
I have to throw that back and go, you don't ever really want, I mean, let's talk specifically, you know, and I've known a few directors of way back when we're given opportunities and we're not prepared for it. I had a moment, I remember, I got a chance to direct a television episode very, very early on in my career. And it was before the Bad News Bears sequel. So I had just done one independent movie. And I remember I got this agent and he said, they're looking for a director of a TV show. And would you go in and you almost have the job. And I went in and the producer looked at me and said, do you think you can do this in 6 days? And I answered, no. And he looked at me like that. And I said, I don't think I'm experienced enough to do that in 6 days. Oh, I didn't get the job. My agent was furious. How could you have said that? I went, because I didn't feel ready to do that. That was not something that would make sense to me. You want to feel ready. Now, I have to add, how do you feel ready to direct your first film? Well, there's always a leap of faith, but maybe you've done a short, maybe you've done a play, maybe you've worked with actors, maybe you've worked on this script, maybe you've figured everything out. When I directed my first film, I think I had every shot planned. I think I had figured out every spot and location, and still things didn't work out the way you want them to work out. But I was prepared. You don't ever want to just rely on talent. That's only about 10%. As once, I will digress and answer one last thing. I'm directing an episode of Law and Order with the famous, wonderful Sam Waterston, and we're shooting at a courtroom on a location, and it's summer in July, and it's hot, and the air conditioning isn't working, and he blows up and gets furious. And I go up to him and I say, I'm new here. I've never done an episode before, but as director, I feel responsible. And I apologize that this air conditioning is a disaster. And he goes, look, that's not the point. 85% of this job is hard work. I have to learn my lines. I've got to be prepared. I've got to come and do it. 15% is fun. When my 15% is ruined, that's when I get upset.
Good answer.
Great.
Okay, what advice can you give a beginner? This is from Abril Salam Baini. I hope I pronounced that right. Forgive me if I didn't. What advice can you give to a beginner that wants to follow the same path as you? I guess he's asking, what was your path?
Yeah, you know, every path is different and every path is new because we're going into a forest that has no road. You are in a day and age where you can make a film for $2,000. this iPhone 4K. Can you believe it? You can get on an iMovie. You can work on a script. You can make a short. I would say, in addition to watching lots of movies, and I'm sequestered in a summer cottage up in Maine. That's where we are. And I will tell you, in addition to catching up on a lot of television and a lot of miniseries and things that we've been watching, I put in yesterday a DVD of, okay, La Strada, okay, a Fellini movie from 1952. And I will tell you, I hadn't seen it in 20 some years. It's a brilliant movie. What do? Watch movies, watch a movie you love, watch it a second time, watch it a third time. You can learn from the masters. You can learn from watching, work with a friend, write something yourself, make a 5-minute short, make a 10-minute short, take an acting class, read scripts. Directing encompasses all of it, from editing to photography to knowing lenses to this. And so what I can tell you is I am still a student. I am still learning. And that's what a director does their whole life, is learn and study.
Michael, what's the difference between directing movies and directing television episodes? This is from Krishna Thakur.
Okay, directing a movie is really okay. I'm going to give you two analogies. I have one is when you direct a movie as a director, you're working in oils. It's a painting. You've got the foreground, the background. You take the details, every little thing. When you do a television movie or a pilot, you're working in watercolors. It's quicker, but when you do a television episode, it's a pencil drawing. There is an art to a pencil drawing. A pencil drawing is a fast, intuitive, quick drawing with one idea. It's a story that has one idea in it that then you mushroom from. A movie, like in oils and a large painting, has complexity and dimension and other characters. You've got 40 some minutes to tell a simple story in an episode. Now, it's faster, you shoot faster. I say it's like doing a sprint versus a marathon. But the other big component is that when you direct a television episode, you are embracing the characters that have been created, the style that exists. You learn about the other episodes. You have to make the series your own. I would never, when I direct a new episode of a series that I've never worked on before, I try to see as many of the shows I can, so that I become as versed in the storytelling as the actors and the writer and the cameraman. Whereas in a movie, it sort of starts with you. It starts with a script, but what you bring to that script and your relationship to that script or that writer, or if it's you, your own relationship to yourself as a writer. But the collaboration in a movie stems from you at the center, creating all those relationships and the vision and the look and the themes and everything you want to tell. So it's a much, that's why a movie can take a year, 2 years of your life, and an episode can take 3 weeks or a month.
Question from Sam Bailoff. Sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah.
He's not a student, but he's a guest. But as I may have mentioned to you, Sam works in locations, worked on a lot of series television as well as big features, and he's very curious. What you as a director, when you're scouting a location, what do you look for?
Okay. There's two components to looking at a location. One is, does it serve the action in the scene? The car's got to pull up in the driveway, and you've got to have distance between the parking garage and the street. So when the two cops come over to interrogate Tim Matheson, we've got that whole relationship set up. If the garage is not facing the street, I don't have a scene. So I need the garage to face the street. Okay. Then the background. Once I've established the action of the characters, and I've always got to think about what the characters are doing and how it works, then the next thing is, what's my background? Well, I want to set up a home in the Hollywood Hills. It's very critical. I'm referring to Quicksand, and Peter knows what I'm talking about. But the idea is that the home of this character has got to be in the Hollywood Hills, because the whole inciting incident occurred on his drive home at night in the Hollywood Hills, turning corners. So my mind goes to the story, and then specifically with the location, what's the foreground, the action of the characters, and then what am I seeing in the background?
Dave Roberts, one of my filmmaking students, has a good question. Have you ever had some serious conflicts to deal with in your career?
Yeah.
That you would like to share?
Yeah. Yes. Life doesn't come without conflict. I've had, the hardest, it's funny because I'm trying to pull myself back. I think the biggest challenge that a director, and I have had in working in production films, is the age-old ongoing battle between budget and what you need to make the film. I have been on several projects where my budget was cut and my shooting days were cut, and I ended up over budget and behind schedule, and all I had was conflict, because they didn't believe that if you open the States too soon, the virus was going to come back. They didn't believe me. They were going, you can shoot it in 20 days. And I said it was scheduled for 35. And they're going, we'll shoot it in 20. That's one of the biggest areas I find in a general sense, the kinds of conflicts. Have I had creative conflicts? Yes. And it really, if I were to play it over in my head, I think they came about as a result of not being clear on my part. I would own it and say, I wasn't clear with the actor what I was looking for, what I needed. And those were always difficult things, but it didn't happen as much. And I think that conflict occurs a lot, and it's just a question of how you cope with it. But the hardest one for me has always been the budget and schedules. That's the one that drives me crazy.
The chairman of our filmmaking department in South Beach, Herschel Faber, wants to know how you made the transition from feature films to television.
I had directed in the first 10 years of my career, from the age of 26 to 36, 6 feature films. And I was a feature film director. But I did not make a $100 million blockbuster hit. Those were the days where, a young filmmaker was, the films were good. Some of them did okay. The Bad News Bears was a big hit. The Richard Pryor movie was a modest hit, very modest. And then there were a couple that were out and out flops. And this is in terms of money, not in terms of creativity, because, for example, I directed a film called Boulevard Nights, which was, as I mentioned, East Los Angeles Chicano gangs, was pulled from the movie theaters, got bad reviews, only for 25 years later for it now to be rediscovered and be brought as one of the 25 films from the National Library of Congress for preservation. And the film's been rediscovered and been written about. And, I went to see it for the first time a couple of years ago with my wife, and at Quentin Tarantino's movie theater in Beverly Hills or Hollywood. It was like, wow, this is a good movie. I thought it wasn't a good movie. So film has a way of growing in certain ways. So I was out of it. I didn't work for 2 years after Dr. Detroit, which was became a bit of a cult hit, but was a flop when it came out.
You know, it's funny. My agent at William Morris, when I first came into LA, I said I wanted to do features. Why would you want to do that? All the money's in television.
Well, in some respects, you know, there is a certain truth to that. For the writer, you know, the directors got a whole other.
Yeah, that's true.
But the best job in television is actually being a director producer, which is what I eventually became. So I got offered a television movie after not working in features, and I did one, and it was kind of a incoherent film that ended up being rewritten while we shot it, and a kind of throwaway, and it led to another job, and it led to another job, and then eventually I sort of got on the list at the networks for television movies, and I was put in that box. That box was a big box when I started. They were making roughly 50 television movies per network. There were 150 television films a year. And I went from one to the other. And I used to say that it was like I went back to film school. I think I became a better director. I directed 25 television movies in about 4 or 5 years. And I think I became more knowledgeable and more experienced and more confident about my craft. If you were to say, do I have misgivings? Well, it would have been nice if I had done the 25 films before the features and then went into feature films, but I learned on the job. But philosophically, I've always felt I learned on the job. And then finally, I got a phone call to direct a pilot. I directed several pilots that hadn't sold, and one was to direct the pilot of Picket Fences, and I met David Kelly, and we had a great meeting, and he didn't hire me. And I was really kind of disappointed, and I loved that script, and another director did the pilot, and then out of the blue, I get a phone call 6 months later, and David Kelly calls me and says, well, it's sold, Picket Fences, and it's got 13 episodes. Would you consider being a co-exec producer? And I answered him and said, you know, I could let me think about it for a day, but I'll answer you right now. Answer is yes. And it started my career in series television. And I thought it was going to be 13 episodes and out. Who knew 4 years later we would win all these Emmys and it would launch my career, his career. It was quite a change in our lives. At some point in a career, when you look back over a lifespan, there's always a moment where things go like here to there, and that was one of them.
We have a question from Chad Brendan, who is an older gentleman. He says, he doesn't say how old, but he lives on the East Coast.
Can't be our age.
Nobody is. He is currently a banker who wants to get into the film business. Chad, I would say, how did we get out of the film business into banking? But it's okay. It's a question for Michael.
Okay, and I assume he is actually referring to getting out of the world of banking and making his own film.
Yeah, he wants to do writing, production, cinematography. He's interested in filmmaking.
Got it. Wow. You know, I'm going to throw a couple of things out. First of all, you know, these online master classes are pretty darn good, aren't they? Have you seen any of those, the master classes?
They don't hold a candle to the New York Film Academy, Michael.
Got it. Okay, so he should join the New York Film Academy. Bottom line is, you know, there is no degree, there is no license that you get. You at some point declare yourself, you're a movie director and you go make your first movie, and whether you put, and I would say you put 5,000 in or 10,000 in or 2,000 in, and you pull people together and you study and you get yourself ready to do it. And you can work on someone else's film, or you pull people together who know about it. it's good to get a good cameraman and a good editor and a good script, and and then hopefully you can't go wrong. But to quote a joke that I sometimes tell, which is a young man went to Mozart and said, "I'd like to play some music and ask you what do you think what do you think of my music?" And he plays a piece, and Mozart looks at him and says, "It's terrible. You shouldn't be a composer." And the guy looks at Mozart and says, "Well, wait, you started writing when you were 3 years old. How could you say that?" And he said, "Yeah, but I never asked anybody." So you don't have to ask anybody. You just go do it.
A question from Kate Morgan's. It's a long question, but let me get to this part of it. Tell us about your recent work on Thinx, how you became involved in it, and what it meant to you.
Oh, that's a great question. I had mentioned my father was blacklisted. He was a card-carrying member of the Communist Party in the 1930s. And I used to ask him, what went on in those meetings? Oh, he said, we'd talk about civil rights and voting rights for Black people and maybe socialized medicine. And, those were the subjects. But today he would be considered, a mainstream Democrat. But at the time, the thing to do was the Communist Party, of which he had been a card-carrying member, and then went off to fight in World War II and was wounded and came back, and then had a career in theater and television, and then was brought up, and his name was on a list, and he was fired from his job, and he didn't work for 12 to 15 years in television, because he had been a member of the Communist Party in the 30s. And at that time, what the lawyers had figured out was if you don't answer, they would say, if you answer yes, then if you don't name names, you're then in contempt of Congress and go to jail. But if you take the Fifth Amendment, which is I don't answer on the grounds that this could incriminate me, you got blacklisted. In essence, your name, networks would not hire you, because your name was on a list that you were once a communist sympathizer. I knew Joe Guilford, who was the son of Jack Guilford, the comedian. And Joe, my parents knew each other's parents, and I knew Joe a little, and he wrote a play about a fictionalized account of his parents' journey through their own blacklist in the McCarthy period. I saw the play in New York, and I told Joe I would love to bring it to Los Angeles. It took us about 5 years to pull it off. And the difference between those 5 years changed the experience of the play. When the play opened in New York, it was at the height of the Obama administration, and people went, "It's a nice piece of history, this play. Wow, this happened 50 years ago, the McCarthy period, and people losing their jobs because they had political convictions and they were left wing or whatever. Well, that's an interesting play." Last year, having done it, or a year and a half ago in Los Angeles, it was a cautionary tale. The audiences were like, "Oh my God, this could happen today. In fact, maybe it is." That the play had a whole different meaning. We, Joe and I, actually were not prepared for that reaction. We didn't even know it at the time. It was a wonderful experience directing the play. I had a wonderful cast. We had a joyous experience. It was great to get back into a theater where we could rehearse and not have to worry about our schedule. And it was very well received, and we wished it had gone on, but it was at a theater, where it had sort of a repertory, and that's the story.
This is a tough question. It's a question that we all get, and it's a hard one. It's Carla Hancock. She's recently graduated in the acting program. How do you break in, Michael? Actor.
How do you break in? Well, everyone needs a break. Everyone needs to know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. I had a cameraman who it was an Australian cameraman who was desperate to break in. And when he was a young man, someone of a family member had given him the phone number of a famous cameraman in Australia, and I'm Don McAlpine. And this friend, this cameraman, would call Don McAlpine all the time and just leave his name, and then he'd never get a call back until finally the guy was shooting a film in Australia, and my friend said, I'm a good friend of Rosie, the person who had made the contact. And Don McAlpine called him back, said, is everything okay with Rosie? Who? He said, no, I'm just I'm a young cameraman, and I'd like to know how do you break into this business? Don McAlpine was on a set shooting a film. You want me to answer this? He said, if you can get here to Australia, you can observe me for a month and we'll figure it. And the guy flew to Australia, became good friends with this cameraman, and it helped him get his break. You got to find an angel somewhere to get started. Now, the angel could be connection to an agent who can get you to an audition. Somehow, one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. And that's sort of been the story of my life.
Michael, I tell actors, I don't know if it's true or not, but I tell them this because I truly believe it, that talent prevails. Talent prevails.
Talent always prevails. The issue is the break, the getting in the door. Once you're in the door, you're on your own. But this is a very, very, very competitive world today. And it feels so much more competitive than it did when we were younger doing it. But then when we were younger doing it, the people who were older felt like it was competitive. So I don't know. And if there's anything that you want to add or share or discuss, I mean.
It's just there are 1,000 answers to how you break in. And one of the things you can do is continually ask. I'm glad you asked the question. Ask everybody you know.
Yes.
You'll get 1,000 different answers, and one will work for you, hopefully.
Yeah.
This comes from Fernanda Alves. And we have a lot of foreign students, very talented foreign students at New York Film. They're from all over the world.
Not great.
And this is a great question because we have so many talented actors who come from foreign countries. And Fernanda asks, how hard is it for a foreign actor to make it, or for a director to cast them in the United States?
It's hard, but it's not impossible. I would, everything, if it were easy, everyone would be doing it. But hard doesn't stop you. Now, I don't know your ability at language. I don't know your age range. I don't know your qualities. But it certainly would be, if it's a reach, it'd be great to come in with some material that maybe you've worked with someone and written and show them what you can do. I think the best way to answer this is you have to make your own path. That's all I really can say about it. You know, yes. You know, is this business looking for the next 70-year-old white Jewish director? That's who I am. I'll go out there and I'll keep banging on those doors until the doors break open. You know, I have people who are wounded by this reality, this ageism. I'm not. I'm just not. And my wife, who's not in earshot at the moment, has even said to me, and I think it's a wise thing to say, there's nothing wrong with moving over for the younger people to take some of these positions. What's wrong with that? You were young once, and I agree. It doesn't mean I'm going to stop. I'm not taking anything away from anybody, but you know, you make your own path. You build your own home.
Fernanda, just remember that every role is written for you. If you believe that, you're going to bring something to it. Nothing ever stopped Ingrid Bergman or Sophia Loren
Or how about this? The best story I ever heard about that is they were casting the TV series of Taxi, and there was a young actor who came in, and his name was Danny DeVito.
I've told this story so many times.
Have you heard this one about when he took the script?
I tell this story to every acting student. Tell it, Michael. I'd rather hear from you.
Okay. And he's walked into the room. He was 4'10". They didn't know who the character of Louis was. They were trying to figure it out. And he walked in and he took the script and he threw it at them and said, "Who the hell wrote this shit?" And they went, "That's Louis. That's Louis." Now that's the story I've heard. Is it the same one?
That's exactly how I heard it, except that I heard that that the description of the character was a big strapping Italian.
Oh,
and he was 4 feet. Yeah. But that's the exact story. He believed that the role was his.
Yes.
And, we experienced that with Donald Sutherland. He was not on our list. We were shooting for Tommy Lee Jones and others. And when we were told, the studio said, it will be Donald Sutherland, we were a little bit disappointed until the table read and we went, oh my God, it was always him. He owns the role. And I don't care if you have an accent or bring truth to the role, you will get the part. And
do you know who else went for a role and felt he owned that role? Is the famous story about Robert Duvall in To Kill a Mockingbird. They didn't see it at all, Boo Radley, at all. And then I heard later from my ex-brother-in-law, who was a screenwriter, Nicholas Meyer, very talented man to this day. They were doing 7% Solution, the Sherlock Holmes, Sigmund Freud. And you know who went after the part of Dr. Watson? Robert Duvall. And they all thought he was wrong and they didn't want to cast him. And he sent them a tape of him playing Dr. Watson with a British accent. And they went, "Who is this?" And he said, and it was Robert Duvall. They went, "Okay, we'll give it to him."
Shubham Medeo, forgive me if I've mispronounced your name. I guess the question is, which way do you go? Do you go to film school or you get a job working as a set PA and work your way up?
Whichever way you feel actually most comfortable, either, both, neither. Who the hell knows? I do believe there's great things to learn in both areas. I certainly benefited from my 3 wonderful years studying with a brilliant film director named Alexander McKendrick at Cal Arts. That was a life-changing experience for me because I got to work with somebody who I thought was a genius director who had directed Sweet Smell of Success, which was a great classic, and The Man in the White Suit and The Lady Killers. And he had stories and he had a story to tell about directing. In fact, there's a book out about Alexander McKendrick called On Directing, written by Paul Cronin, a wonderful book that is worth looking at. So my feeling is that I'm not going to put down any hard and fast rule. I do know there's great value if you can't get into the film school of your choice, but you've gotten a job to be a PA somewhere, I'd say jump at it.
Devonta Anderson is one of our acting students in South Beach. Well, asked the question, what's an executive producer? What are the responsibilities?
Okay. Well, an executive producer on a television series is if you're the director executive producer, is a very big job because you are overseeing what goes on with the directors and the actors on the set, what this breaking down the script to fit into production, overseeing the budget, though there's a line producer handling the budget, so that it all sort of ends up on your desk. And it's an all-consuming job. And and you have to be, as I've said to people, as an executive producer, director on a TV series, you've got to be 5 places at once. So how do you do it? You make a decision. You know what? I'm skipping that meeting. I'm skipping the editor's viewing. I've got to get to the set to solve a problem that the actor is having with a scene, and the director needs some help. You've got to be, your job, you could go without sleep, but sometimes you got to pace yourself. So it's all consuming.
Great question from Maria Luisa Celia. Forgive me, Maria, if I didn't get the last name correct. This is a great question. You're a showrunner, you're a director, whatever. You're in a casting session. How much do you want to see what you envision versus what surprises the actor brings?
I do think that's a great question, because it starts with you've made a personal decision about what you're looking for. I don't tend to go into a casting session and go, I don't know what this character is. I've had an idea as a director. I mean, there's a certain, if it's a social worker, I want a certain amount of authority because the story, the woman is a very strong character. So I'm looking for those qualities. Then when the actor does something that I didn't expect, which is a short-tempered, abrasive quality to the scene, that all of a sudden she's a firecracker and she takes it to be that she has no time to deal with anything, I go, oh, that's such a great addition, and the scene works. I'm describing an example that I experienced when I did a television pilot of a series called The Guardian, which was on for 3 years, and we cast a famous theater actress as the social worker named Kathleen Chalfant. And Kathleen Chalfant was known in the theater circles, but not in the film and television, and the casting person wisely brought her out to audition, and she was the second person that came in. And I had 3 weeks for casting, and I remember she walked out, and I turned to the other writer, executive producer, and I said, well, we can stop now. I said, we can spend another 3 weeks casting, or we can cast her. And he went, what? I said, this is beyond what I imagined. I know what the character needs. She brought herself and something special to it. She's a home run. And then we're like, oh, well, I have to keep casting. I said, fine, just put a pin in her. 3 weeks later, we cast Kathleen Chalfant.
Michael, have you finished that book on directing? If so, what's it called? If you haven't finished it, what are you going to call it?
I'm working on some titles. I don't know. It's memoirs of directing, the personal point of view to directing. I don't want to do a book that's about, eye lines and camera angles and da-da-da-da. I want to do a book that's about, and this is the theme I've been working on, which is, what is it? What's the subtextual drive that says, I want to be a director? And everybody who will be reading that book, I've already sort of wrote the first chapter. If you're already reading this book, you've already got some desire to direct. So what is that? What is the subtextual component that drives you, that is personal? Because I think directing is such a personal experience. And I think Peter could attest to that in relation to our experience. When you write, it's completely personal. But I remember now, something's coming to my mind, that and I remember having some conversation with you and Dave where you kind of said, we imagined this television movie a little lighter, a little funnier, or it was like at one point you said maybe Beau Bridges would play and it was like, Donald is so dark and it's so but it was so profound. Do you have any memory of that, or is it mine?
my memory was, and I tell you, I'm going to say this to all of our students: listen to people. Uh, we we wrote this script, and it was everybody in town wanted to do it. We were in a bidding war. Everyone wanted to do it as a feature, but everyone said the same thing. There's just something wrong with the script. We couldn't figure out what the life of us, what it was. We had a line producer said, "Let me read it, give you some thoughts on it." He said, "Well, what's the line producer going to give us?" He came in and he said, "The relationship between your protagonist and your villain is too complex. They're too friendly. There's not enough conflict. There's not enough jeopardy." We went, "My God, he's right." We went back in 2 days, rewrote it, sold it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
Listen to everybody. Listen to people. It's good to get notes. I'm going to try to skip people who've asked more than one question so everyone gets a chance. Francis Nwabufo, I hope I pronounced it correctly. How do you know something's going to be successful? You read a script, how do you know?
You don't. You don't. That's a simple answer. How many times have I been wrong? You don't. I remember Picket Fences. I remember, yikes, it's 13 episodes and out. We'll have a good experience. I remember The Guardian pilot. It'll never sell. I remember, and then I thought something was going to be a home run and it wasn't. I mean, Dr. Detroit, we were counting our money.
Michael, I'm going to kind of reword this question because it's a great question. Gismara, maybe it's Gismara Noguera, sorry. How do you deal with the balance between creative freedom and, studio or other interests?
By the way, I'm going to go back to that other question for 1 second, because there's another thought that occurred to me, and then we'll get to this one. Because I think there is a feeling when you are working that when you have something special, you can feel it. I don't know what that means in relation to commercial films or success or failures, but when something's working, that's exciting. And I will, again, because Peter is here, but it was a situation where we were delighted during the shooting of that television movie because something was working between Tim Matheson and Donald Sutherland. It was magic. And that was making every day exciting. And I knew we had something. I didn't know what we had, but I knew we had something. And I've had that many times. I had that with Richard Pryor. I had that with the Chicago Hope pilot. I'll never forget. I'm shooting. I've got Mandy Patinkin and Hector Elizondo and Adam Markin, and I'm going, I got gold here. The characters are flying off the page. So that is another answer to that question. But you never know how it's going to end up or how it's going to be received. But you do know when you feel good about something.
Let's go on to Kismara's question. Creative freedom, I mean, in the theater, director is God. And feature films, director has a lot of say. Episodic television, not so. The balance between creative freedom and other interests. Compromise, Michael. How do you deal with compromise?
Yes, I think that's the answer, isn't it? How do you deal with compromise? I'm going to flip this and say compromise and time restrictions and adjustments is the magical craft of filmmaking. I had a life-changing experience directing my third film, and I tell this story a lot. I'm shooting this film, Boulevard Nights, and we've got a big scene, and the production man comes to me and says, "We've been kicked out of the cemetery. You've got an hour and a half to do this scene." And I went, "Oh my God." And we figured it out in one shot, and we laid dolly track, and I worked with the actors, and the cameraman laid the track, and we shot it, and we got out of there before we got kicked out. And the next day we would go watch the dailies. In those days, you would go to a screening room and look at it on a screen. And I looked at it and said, why is this the best shot of the film so far? What happened? We were thinking on our feet. We were coming up with solutions. We were forced to create. There's something about the process. And that's why actually I so enjoy the television experience and the pressure and the compromise, because it's creative. It forces you to do something. You're not in a world where you could say, let's come back tomorrow. You've got to get it done that day. So that's how you deal with it.
Yeah, it's like shooting in Pasadena, right? They shut you down and say goodnight.
Yep.
Jacek Laskus.
Just Mr. Laskus.
There, that's a cinematographer.
Yeah.
And he's joined us. Thank you.
Yes, Laskus.
And Jacek asks, how do you develop a visual style of a film working with a cinematographer?
Well, we are
Especially an accomplished one.
Right. Well, Jacek, of course, is the cameraman from The Guardian, if you remember, as well as several other films of mine. And we worked very closely together. And I wish Jacek would appear so he could stand up here and give me his version. I think it always starts with the script. Jacek would agree. What is the story you want to tell? What's the emotional component of the story? Not the plot, not the necessarily the characters, but what is the emotion that you want to share with the audience? And from there starts to come an emergent style. And it can be anything from, a compressed feeling of enclosure in the story that demands long lenses. And I think if I could say again, in terms of The Guardian, we played with, not The Guardian, Quicksand, we played with long lens scenes and that sense of tension that existed in the relationship. So that's how you develop a style. Good to see you, Jacek. Hear you. See you later.
This is a great question. And working with actors, especially, working with professional actors, celebrity star talent, what techniques do you use to communicate to get what you want?
Well, that is a life.
Oh, that's from Rachel Wallach Frank, by the way.
Okay. That's a lifelong study. Many directors continue to get together and talk about that. And I occasionally go on YouTube, and when I'm distracted or I'm taking a break, I'll click in Francis Coppola, or I'll click in Marlon Brando, and I'll hear stories. And all of a sudden Coppola would say, there was a great interview at the YMHA a couple of years ago with Annette Einsdorf, look it up, talks about working with actors. And he said, Marlon Brando, you never talked to him about acting. Yeah, he was too smart. You did. He would come in and go, is it here? Where's the shot? And then, I would deal with props. I'd give him a little salami, or I'd give him a little prosciutto, and then, that's one way to work with a Marlon Brando. He said I didn't have to talk to him about the character. I gave him a cat to hold the cat so he could pet the cat. It's brilliant directing. Or Kazan talking about working with Marlon Brando. He said, I used to tell him what I'd want him to do and move here. And he said, every idea I had, Marlon Brando would say, are you serious? Really? You want me to do that? That's lousy, or that. And he said, but that was Brando's process, because he would fight it and then find his own. This is a lifelong study. I will say this. Actors want to be directed. Actors want your feedback. They want your support. They want to feel safe. The best story I can tell you is I'm 29 and I'm directing Herbert Berghoff, who was a famous acting teacher in New York, and he's in his 60s or 70s, and I'm 29, and it's a feature film. It's called Those Lips, Those Eyes, and he's brought his own wardrobe, and the wardrobe department hates it, and they want to change his clothes, and he says, no, I want my jacket, I need my clothes, and he has a fit, and the wardrobe people come to me, and I go over, and they say, it doesn't work, and this, and Herbert's all upset, and he goes, and I go, let him wear exactly what he wants to wear. I mean, to me, it looked fine. I said, let him wear what he wants to wear. And they walked off, huff, and Herbert comes to me and says, you just learned the best lesson you could. Don't ever forget about directing actors, because he was a great teacher. And I said, what? He said, you made me feel safe. He said, that's the most important thing. So you want to make an actor feel safe. You want to make them feel like they can do anything. You don't want to judge.
We've got a bunch of really great questions coming up here. Do you work with the same folks in the industry? Same crew, same people?
Yeah, I'd like to. Yatsik, we've done several things together. I think probably the most of any cameraman I've worked with. And you know, it's always a pleasure to build a group. I've worked with several actors, producers. Yes, it's always a good idea to work with people that you know. And then, of course, it's always meeting new people and developing new relationships.
That was from Sage Ortiz, one of our filmmakers. Yes, and I know Rob Korn. Everybody fights for Rob Korn when he was a first AD. Remember?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Now he's an executive producer.
Yeah, I spoke to Rob Korn for the first time in about a couple of years, like a month ago.
Yeah, what a terrific first AD he was.
Yep.
Okay, a lot of questions here. We have from Roxanne Lewis. What advice for a woman who is transitioning from a successful stage career in New York as a director, choreographer, now going into film?
Okay, well, but you've already got a leg up. Okay, because you've already worked without the help of camera and cutting and timing. You've already put scenes together, you've staged them, you've put them on their feet. You've told stories with actors and script. So that's a big plus. Learning about the camera. I'll give you the one thing McKendrick always used to talk about, and then it's 60 seconds and you'll have it. You can go with whatever you want. The theater is a proscenium. You look at the stage and you direct the audience to go look at left, to look right, to figure out. And the film is a wedge. It starts like an axis like this: foreground, background, further background. It goes like that. And it's a fundamental different way to look at things. You know, you want to stage in relation to that wedge. You can move, you can pan, you can dolly, but in fact, you're always thinking about foreground and background, whereas theater goes that way.
Only one member in the film audience.
Yeah.
Dylan Lorenzo asks, how important is that first impression, though? An actor walks in before they even audition. Just that, hello, how are you?
I was thinking, is it the first impression for the director or for the actor? The first impression is important. It's important. You're coming in with who you are. I have to say, I'll tell you one thing I've always found, and it's both the hard part of auditioning, but the important part of auditioning. I've always found if a person starts to feel uncomfortable and says, can I do it again? Can I start it again? Can I try it one more time? It doesn't work because they're second guessing themselves. And I've seen it 24 times where the actor does it again without direction, doesn't want to hear your feedback, says, you know what, I want to do that again, or can I have another chance? And you sense their own judging of themselves. So to turn this around, not only is a first impression important, what's most important is to not judge yourself. Because that's a bit of a contradiction, what I'm saying, but maybe you get it. Does that make sense to you, Peter? Do you know what I'm
Totally
saying?
makes sense to me. And eh, I always tell my actors that the best, not to go in there creating a character or the most complex and interesting character that has ever been invented. Go in there confident and be friendly, be nice, doesn't hurt. This is a question, and I'm going to kind of rework this question a little bit from Prince Mensa. The difference between working from your own script and working from written by somebody else. But I guess what I'm really asking is that one of the great important skills of not just a director, producer, studio exec is understanding script. How important is that, Michael, to becoming a successful director?
I think it's very important. I think it's actually the most important part of directing, is not only understanding a script, but what understanding a script means. I mean, what is the story you're telling, and what is the theme of the story you're telling, and what's the theme in the script that you want to tell? You know, all those things come to play.
Josefina Diaz Zunino asked a similar question: is how much influence do you have as a director working with the writer in developing the script or taking it, refining a script before production?
Well, every situation is different. Boy, you know, I've got a terrific screenwriter here, and I have to say to Peter, if you remember, I think I had very few notes on the script. Is that correct?
Michael, I've sold over a dozen screenplays. I could add up the notes I've gotten on screenplays on one page. Nobody ever gives me notes.
You see, okay, so there you have it. But I think that script was so well thought out. The only thing I remember now that whether it was changed or whether we did it together, but this was a Donald Sutherland contribution. Before I go there, I want to say that every situation is different, but it doesn't mean if I don't have notes, it doesn't mean that I'm not contributing to the script. So that in some respects, you can go, boy, this is a great blueprint. I know what to do with it. Or everything works wonderfully, but I'm having a problem with the end, or I'm having a problem in the middle. And I think there was something that did happen in Quicksand where Sutherland had an idea for his death. Do you remember that?
Not really.
Okay. He wanted the death to be an ironic moment of he finally got everything right, and then the guy was in the hotel room and killed him. So he wanted to go down to the tables, and we did one shot with one slot machine, and he's winning all the money, and he's drinking, and everything's great. He's pulled it off, and then we added a shot of him walking down a hallway, and he's got the key, and he's wrapping the key, and he's doing a dance, and he goes in, and he goes into the room, and he goes in, and he sits down, and he looks up and goes, "Oh shit." Boom, and he's dead.
I do remember that. And, you know, really, it's amazing how often actors make very good, actors give you very, very few notes, but they're always good notes. They're usually about protecting character. And they detect some inconsistency.
And he was like, he was a loser who really thought he was a winner. And that was what was so wonderful about what he saw in this character, which is, oh, fuck, I missed it because I won at the tables and everything was great. And he just wanted to have that exhilarating moment.
I do remember one thing about Donald, and I tell this to actors, and Donald was not always easy as a person. As an actor, he was wonderful, but
He
as a
wasn't
person,
easy.
he's
It wasn't
difficult.
easy. He wasn't easy to stage, by the way. He wasn't easy to stage.
But I remember he did a scene, and it was beautiful. It was perfect. It was wonderful. And you said, perfect. Thank you. And he said, I'd like to do it again. And you said, why? He said, I missed a word.
Wow.
He understood every word mattered in a script. I loved that about him.
Yes, yes. He was very respectful of the script. He was very respectful.
This is a question. Uh, this is a great question. Tamina Taranum, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. How important is it to be a good actor to direct? In other words, your knowledge of acting.
Okay. Before I answer, I do want to say we're heading towards the 3 o'clock witching hour here. Are you okay for us to go another 10 or 12 minutes? I know it's flown by, but
Michael, I'm enjoying it. I think we we're losing very few participants, and we have a lot more questions. So as long as you're, how long are you good for?
I'm good for another 15. So
Okay, let's do it.
okay. Okay. Look, it helps to, I think it's important for every director to have acted. Take an acting class, you can be terrible. But once you've gone on stage in a classroom and acted for other actors with a teacher, you'll understand inside what an actor does. And you don't have to be able to act it. You have to understand the actor's process. And in understanding the actor's process, you also have to learn the language of the actor so that you can be able to say things that help the actor, but don't confuse the actor.
Moving on, we've got so many questions. I'm going to go through. Hello from Tova later.
Oh, okay.
Let's see.
Hello back.
Oh, this is an interesting question from Paula Pavao. What do you wish you knew when you started your career that you didn't? In other words, what advice would you give to your younger self starting out? Isn't that a great question?
Yes, it is a great question, which leads into the kind of thing I've been thinking about in writing the book. Boy, I wished I was more flexible and more open and less and confronted my fears better.
Yeah.
It's a very, we're talking pretty profound. There's nothing about, if I just was looser and easier and was less rigid.
Yeah, that's great advice. I
had a moment on a film where I fought the studio about the ending of a movie, and it's too long to explain. And years later, it troubled me, and I thought, you know what? I think the studio was trying to tell me something. And the guy was right. And I ended up at a restaurant next to the studio head, and I turned to him and I said, he was no longer head of the studio, and he was kind of curt and cold with me. And I said, listen, Bob, I just want to tell you, 10 years ago, you were trying to tell me something and I couldn't listen. And you know what? You were right. And he goes, oh, please, no, Michael. I said, no. And he was like, we became fast friends. But he hadn't forgotten. And I was a young upstart, wouldn't listen to advice.
Here's a question from Eleonora Albano, and I'm going to just kind of twist this question around a little bit. Why did you decide to leave the theater, go to film? Why did you want to become a filmmaker?
I loved the theater. I also loved movies. And I'm going back to the theater, and I've gone back to the theater. But I would have, boy, it's a really good question. I suppose I probably was just more excited about what film had to offer when I was younger. and I felt that I had a better grasp of things with film. But that's a tough question. I don't know completely what to say.
Steve Wyclaw, one of our filmmaking students, how important is it to get experience in different genres? What's the risk of getting pigeonholed, I guess, as a director?
Well, you know, I think this pigeonholed issue it grows by the day, where all of a sudden I am now what, the procedural police detective. I mean, it's like that's what I do, you know. Whereas for a while I was a comedy director, and then I was character-driven director, and um, I'm so against the pigeonholing concept, but there's a person whom I very much respect who did an article about me a couple of years ago saying that one of the problems that I had as a feature film director was I couldn't be pigeonholed. That in fact, my films were all so different that in fact, it wasn't that I didn't have a vision or a point of view or a style, but that in fact, the variety was who I was. And I thought that was very sweet. I wished I had known that. But the I think there's great advantage to playing with different genres. There is. But again, if you want to do your own thing, and you love horror films and you want to make horror movies, God bless you, and make horror movies.
Jessica Cristano, starting at 40, too late?
Say that again. Starting.
She's saying starting at 40. Is that too late?
Absolutely not.
Good.
Absolutely not. Are you kidding?
Okay. Let's see. Oh, terrific question from Emma Stockwilder. I've had this question asked to me numerous times, different ways. Casting minority, casting diversity, some of the challenges and the aspirations. I know the studios put a lot of pressure on us as showrunners, but what are some of the issues and challenges of diverse casting?
Well, I think first and foremost, you know, diversity is a very, very real issue, and I think that opportunities are opening up in a good way and should continue to open up. And what you want to do is you want to encourage, help, and guide the diversity choices, and hopefully helping people move along. I stay very open to all those ideas, and will change characters if I feel the right actors come in the room. So in some respects, diversity exists and you've got to do it, but at the same time, you want to give people opportunities who you sense have the ability to grow and are interested, and then it's not just about diversity. I don't know how to completely answer the question other than say that it's a reality. And you know, I will tell you that I recently had to interview 6 young, in their 40s and 30s, female directors who were part of a female forward program. And I will tell you the talent was incredible. I have never been more blown away by all 6, and had real trouble making the choice of one. I felt that actually was unfair, but I ended up choosing this woman from Pakistan who had made a wonderful independent feature. And I was, you know, I'm in awe of the talent that's out there.
Head of our acting department at South Beach, Mark Maccabi, talk about the process of working with actors, table reads, rehearsals, collaboration, and then how that process changes once you get on the set. And he's particularly interested for the under fives or smaller roles, where you really have the opportunity to do more hands-on.
Well, you know, uh, the hardest thing is those 5 and under roles. I mean, they're so hard because there's a temptation to over prepare. And my father, who was an acting teacher for many, many years, who actually was Russian born and spoke and could read Russian and studied Stanislavski, that he said he thought, because of his own knowledge of the language, he said, I think the book An Actor Prepares is the wrong title. He said it should be called An Actor Rehearses. It's the director who prepares. So that the actor is very, if an actor can come in open and present and be in that 5 or under scene and is not locked into having rehearsed and prepared it on his own, but comes in ready to play, that you as a director have a great opportunity to be able to give very cogent, swift, clear direction and simple direction that can change the whole scene. So, you know, it's a dialogue that exists between the actor and the director.
Here's a question dear to my heart, because I hate improv on the set, but Herschel wants to know what it was like working with Dan Aykroyd. How much improv did you allow on set with a guy who's a master of improv? Great question.
You know, he did very little improv. He found the, listen, he found his character. And once he found the character of Dr. Detroit, he could do exactly as written. But the search of the character, and by the way, he is a genius at this. So I have to tell you that he showed me what he was doing and I would make a comment or two, but he had the most elaborate ideas and he executed them. And I have to say, he was very, again, and I think this is the part that, you know, as Peter says, he appreciates, but I worked with 2 great comedy actors who very much relied and respected the written word.
This is from Yuchi Tian. Michael, do you think a director should know about editing?
Yes.
In a word.
But I will also say, and this has become a little bit of a lost art, is when not to cut. The editing, I'm finding that editors are cutting like crazy, and where's that wonderful long take? When's that wonderful moment? Where's that wonderful scene? I sometimes go down memory lane and look at scenes where there's no cutting. That's cutting. I was doing a film and I had a wonderful film editor named Richard Halsey who had cut Rocky and all this. And he came to me and he said, you know what I love about the last scenes, the 3-4 scenes I've just put together? All I had to do was remove the slates. You did oneers. I love that. That's a film editor talking. It's as crazy as I actually had the great fortune of working with the late James Horner, brilliant composer, you know, Titanic, Braveheart, and he scored to Jillian on our 37th birthday for me. And there was a scene where we had put in temp music and we were temping the film, which means you're going through the film and choosing where music should be. And he said, I'm going to come in a little later here. And then we looked at a scene and he said, can you run that scene again without the temp score at all? I'd like to look at it. So we did it again. And I remember the editor was a little horrified by this, but it was okay. And he looked at it and James goes, you know, that scene is better silent without music. And And I remember he left, and the editor goes, "Are you kidding? I mean, we're paying him $500,000, and he's saying no music, and he's only writing 25 minutes of music." I said, "That is music."
Michael, you wanted to kind of button it up at 3 o'clock,
Sure. Yeah.
or did you want to keep going? We do have other questions. It's up to you.
Let's do 3 last questions. The big.
Okay, here's a great question from Laura Osborne, and it's an impossible question. All your years of experience, Michael, what are your most memorable moments working as a film producer director? That's a tough one.
You know what? I have many, and I have no favorites. I have many. And I think every time you do a film, even a television movie, or even an episode, they are another child in your family, your creative family. So I can't look and say, you know, I like the 5th one best and the 6th one. I have affection for them all. The ones that work, the ones that don't work.
Michael, Carla Hancock wants to know, have you ever fired an actor on set?
No. Almost, but no.
Okay, let's make this the last question. It'll come from me. Michael, I'd like you to talk to our students about, especially our aspiring directors and producers. You really do have to be multilingual, don't you? You have to be able to speak the language of technology, the language of art, speak to designers, to editors, to composers. Breadth of knowledge. And your work, you mentioned it takes a lifetime. How important is it to be able to speak architecture, to be able to?
Well, you know what, you kind of answered it, all the areas, and I think it's important, but I'll just go a step further with it, because I think it's at the heart of what a director does, which is all those things. So if you're doing a film and it takes place in the 18th century in Rome, you're going to want to get out history, and you want to know what goes on in the period, and you're going to want to know architecture, and you're going to want to do your research. Research is so important, you know, in terms of learning about the world that you are recreating as well as creating. And then sometimes if you're a kind of person who, you know, is a George Lucas in your brain, and he's going to create from thing, but he kind of used the old serials, the old, you know, I don't think they were space operas, but they were, you know, horse opera serials when he dreamt up Star Wars to a degree. It's sort of like in the future. So it's whether it's coming from your own imagination or whether, but research helps tremendously. I mean, you look at Kubrick and Space Odyssey. I mean, there was tremendous research in dealing with advances in space technology, where in some respects he was so ahead of the curve, it still feels like doesn't date. The director encompasses all facets of creativity, I think. Is there anything that you?
Yeah, you and I started with 35 millimeter film, but we've had to make the adjustments to technology. I mean, start going from a Panavision to an Alexa 65, understanding nonlinear editing and all of the technology. And it's just never ending, isn't it?
Never ending. The whole digital photography world has changed the way we look at things. And there was a long period where I was holding on to film as the thing, and now, well, what is there are pluses to new technology. There can be minuses to new technology. You know, you can rely on technology. You don't want to do that, but at the same time, you want to benefit from the best of it. And you know, I struggle with an idea, which is, you know, do I go and shoot a film on an iPhone and shoot it myself and then edit it myself? But I do say somewhere in a funny way, when it comes to editing, I love the relationship between the editor and the director, because it's another, you know, I like that objectivity. I like having an editor who can say, no, try this, no, try that. There's something about that dynamic that I don't think I want to be my own editor. I'm not sure I want to do that.
And that goes with all the collaborative artists in film. Right?
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
great. Okay, any final words of wisdom or encouragement to our students as we wrap this up?
Yeah, I think we should pay a little tribute to Carl Reiner today,
Ah,
who passed at 98,
yes.
who was writing into his last years. And all the life force of everyone who wants to create. It's an ageless process. It's an ageless experience. And stay healthy during these troubled times. The world is turned on its axis. Everything is upside down. Upheaval is of the day. I know we've never experienced anything like this in our lifetime, but I'm not sure the planet has. I don't know. I mean, we are in historic, apocalyptic times. We are living it right now. We are living it right now. So breathe, take it in, be safe. I wrote a piece this morning. I was writing a little something, and I wrote it from the standpoint of the coronavirus. And I basically said, all I'm asking for is respect. Wear a mask, do social distance, and respect me. And then I will go away. But if you don't respect me, I'm going to stick around. I'm a virus. I want to be contained. Anyway, I wrote this piece, which was basically about this unique moment in our his history as a planet. It's all I got to say.
Michael, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been such a pleasure to see you and to
Peter. So
your wisdom. Thank you all for all your wonderful questions, and hope to see you again sometime soon. Bye.
Okay, take care. Bye, Peter.